Hey, it's Alex Ratcliffe from Board Game Co. And this is going to be a bit of a look back at the experience I personally had with Gamefound versus Kickstarter. For those who don't know, the short version of it is Awaken Realms, who owns Gamefound. Gamefound has always been a pledge manager, or at least it's been a pledge manager for many years, and that means that post Kickstarter, when the campaigns go into, well, the next step, very often that next step is having a pledge manager to manage the additional pledges that will come in, to manage distribution, to manage all these different facets of Kickstarter that are not as necessarily as exciting as the campaign, but are an essential part of the process. And Gamefound has been a free to launch, a free to use pledge manager for many years now. I did a whole interview with Marcin from Awaken Realms about Gamefound being turned into a crowdfunding platform, around Gamefound's origins, around a whole bunch of stuff. I'll link to that down below. But basically, this past year, Awaken Realms announced, in 2020, Awaken Realms announced that Gamefound was going to not just be a pledge manager, but was going to be a full competitor to Kickstarter, a full crowdfunding platform, specifically initially focused around board games, but potentially, who knows, the sky's the limit, and most companies I know are happy to continue to grow as long as it makes sense. That being said, wherever they do or don't go next, Gamefound is built from the ground up to be friendly to board games, to be friendly to the way board games are run on Kickstarter, the way that they manage, the needs that they have, the stretch goals, the add-ons, the way board games have evolved over the years has become a very specific genre of a subset of Kickstarter, and it's one of the biggest aspects of Kickstarter. Many, I believe, I could be wrong, I believe board games as a category are the single highest category of things on Kickstarter, or maybe it's games in general, I'm not certain about that. And some of the top Kickstarters of all time are board games. I believe Kingdom Death Monster, Frosthaven. I think Frosthaven is the third highest Kickstarter of all time. There's a lot of basically stuff in this space, and the idea of having a central platform to manage the way these campaigns are run, as opposed to these games and campaigns being run on another platform and then kind of hodgepodging their needs, is basically where we are. And so Gamefound was launched with that vision of trying to, of not Gamefound, Gamefound as a crowdfunding option was developed to meet that need, to actually give the creators and the users what they are looking for. And I was curious. Well, first of all, when I first heard about it, I was skeptical. I thought it would go the way of any of these other platforms that just aren't taking off, Indiegogo or GoFundMe or who knows, of many other campaigns, although I don't think GoFundMe is for stuff like that. Anyways, any other options where people can launch a campaign, they generally just haven't taken off. They haven't done that well. It's hard to get people off Kickstarter because it's a central place. And then additionally, the actual options they're giving you don't seem to be better. They just seem to be different, and in many cases subpar, and subpar plus the aspect that people have to get used to the way it works, the way it's different and whatnot. And so Gamefound is basically coming in, or came in, and they brought ISS Vanguard to the table. ISS Vanguard was going to be the first board game that was launched on Gamefound as a crowdfunding platform, and they came in bringing the familiarity and all the pros of Kickstarter, or most of the pros. That's going to be the point of this video, along with many of the things that are different. There'll be many aspects that they could potentially still improve on. At the end of the day, while they are coming in with improvements, it's also true that this is literally their first project ever. There are so many different things that they may well have on their roadmap. This video that I'm putting together of my own personal experience, pros, cons, what I'd like to see more, and all of that, that's specifically, many of these things may be on Awaken Realms' roadmap or on Gamefound's roadmap. It's two separate entities, same parent company. And so I am curious to see how it goes. But I just thought it'd be interesting to do a bit of a compare and contrast. Because I will say that my initial thought, like I said already briefly, my initial impression was skeptical. Then as I looked into the features they were offering, I was actually very excited. I was like, this is actually important. This is a very beneficial thing for this space. And then I met with my son from Awaken Realms, and I spoke to him, and then found out that it's not just things that will be improvements for the consumer side of things, for the backer, for you and I, but as well as that, it's going to be many options to the table that improve the flexibility and the options and the knowledge and all those things for the creator, for the Kickstarter creator, the project creator as well. And so I got very excited from there. Then the actual campaigns launched, and while I am very happy with Gamefound, make no mistake, I will say the noticeable difference in terms of my own quality of life from backing the different campaigns was minimal. There were pros, there were also cons, a lot of things I'd like to see. Do not get me wrong, I am very excited as Gamefound as a platform. If their first campaign was equitable, maybe marginally better than a Kickstarter campaign, then I'm very curious what the future will bring, what features they'll develop. And so that's enough of a background of talking the premise of this video, where I'm coming at it from. And let's start with just some things that they do differently. Some will be just me popping back and forth between Kickstarter and Gamefound, and some will be actually going over those features. So to begin with, Kickstarter has a few pros in its core. Kickstarter has a few things that for me made the experience better. Not all these things will be equal. There's just things I could think of that I preferred in the Kickstarter platform. The first is going to be, and this is offhand, this is something I already knew about as a potential problem, is Kickstarter has all these features of so-and-so just backed. Meaning so-and-so just backed, this project. So-and-so just backed that project. It's the general idea and awareness that other people are jumping in. It's great for both the consumers. Well, great's a relative term, and it triggers that FOMO. But it's an awareness to consumers of projects that may or may not be on your radar. Not everyone is subscribed to a channel like mine or any other Kickstarter news channel that will tell you what's going on. And so to that end, the so-and-so just backed feature on Kickstarter is very useful. It's something that I think Awakened Realms should really implement at some point in some way, but that's basically as of right now. And number 2 is going to be an app. Kickstarter has an app, Gamefound does not. Gamefound is focusing very heavily on a mobile-friendly website, and that's going to be a pro and a con, because as much as I do use the Kickstarter app and appreciate that it exists, I will say that the actual experience on the app is subpar, from a lack of threaded comments to updates that refresh as soon as your screen goes dark every single time. There's a lot of things that's wrong with the Kickstarter app, but it does have an app, and that, to a certain extent, is a pro. It gives it a little more of a presence in the market that Gamefound, I think, over time may want to do an app. I don't know what the actual plans are. I just think mobile friendly will take you a long way. It will not necessarily take you all the way. Number 3, updates showing fully in an email. This is one that I saw a lot of complaints upon, and this is one that I also felt myself, that in Kickstarter, one of the things I do like is when I get an update from the project to my email, that update is fully in the email. I think that's something to show pictures or whatnot, and if you want to watch a video, you do have to click through to the actual Kickstarter. But as a general note, the update is fully in the email. You don't have to click through to Kickstarter to then click and check out the whole update, again, unless there's actually a video in that update. Then that will change the whole conversation. On Gamefound, as of right now at least, and I wonder if there'll be an option, I wonder how they plan on addressing it, changing it, who knows what, but as of right now on Gamefound, they have the initial update, and then you have to click through to Gamefound. It's introducing a level of resistance. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't mind significantly clicking and then heading to Gamefound, but there were times where I was just a little busier and I just saw the update and I was like, oh, I'll get to it later because I can't click on it now. It's one more step in general in life, in the internet, in the world of ADD. You want to reduce the amount of resistance anyone possibly goes through, and having that extra click, that extra load, that extra weight, as opposed to just reading it in my email, was a small, again, very small, but a con nonetheless compared to Kickstarter. Then number 5, I think, number 4. Number 4 is going to be updates, being able to navigate from update to update. On Kickstarter, when you go to an update, you click on an update or whatnot, and then you scroll down towards the end, which can be its own thing, but generally you're done with the update or whatnot. You get to the end, you finish reading, which is always a different experience if there's multiple languages, because technically when you're done, you're not actually at the bottom. And then you can navigate with this little thing, previous, next, or whatnot. Gamefound did not seem to have that from what everything I can see over there. And by the way, almost everything I say is going to be hedged with. For all I know, it's a feature I missed. This was my first Gamefound campaign, something I could have missed. But Gamefound didn't seem to have any option to navigate from one update to the next. You have to go back to the updates, and then from there. Now, you could obviously go to the URL and punch in update 16 instead of 17. You could play around with that. But in terms of user navigation, you have to go back to the updates and then to another update. Back to the updates and then to another update. You couldn't simply navigate from one update to the next. And I would say from the 5 things that I've actually commented on, this one is probably the most frustrating to me personally. Now, I might be different than other people as well. Keep that in mind, because as I put out videos, I would frequently go through all the updates again to brush up and remind myself of what's going on. In order to do a video of, hey, here's an ISS Vanguard update, I probably am going through updates one after the other in a different way than many other people would on the platform. I imagine most people are either reading them as they come in, not reading them at all, or potentially they have that initial, I just backed 5 days in, let me read the last 5 updates. So it's certainly a feature that I'm sure many others experience, but I might be more sensitive to that particular one. That's going to be the aspects of what Gamefound or what Kickstarter has better than Gamefound in terms of my personal experience throughout the ISS Vanguard campaign. which leads to what the things are that Gamefound does better. And Gamefound is going to be more about the general presentation and usability of a bunch of things. It's not going to be some of these small other stuff. It's going to be, let's start with the beginning. So stretch goals and daily unlocks. So the way they're handling it right now is they have those stretch goals and daily unlocks. And in the case of ISS Vanguard, they didn't do stretch goals. They had daily unlocks. But you have that constant progress bar of how things are going. So you feel more involved in the actual progression towards an unlock, as opposed to just kind of watching the money rise or the back account rise or whatever it is. There's more of an involvement in an actual technological backing up of whatever the stretch goal or daily unlock is. I will say that the aspect of the way it's because they did daily unlocks, they had this thing where you're like, oh, 33% of the way there, which is counted in days because it's like 3 days to the next unlock, so you're 33% of the way there. And I do think that's different. I think it would be better to have 1 day left or 2 days left or whatever it is, or hours, minutes, whatever you want to do. I think a countdown would be a better mental fit for how many days there are, or time based, as opposed to putting 50% left on days. But yeah, Kickstarter stretch goals and daily unlocks were more integrated in Gamefound and felt like they were actually part of the experience, because they are. Like I said, Gamefound was built with how Kickstarter operates now around board games as opposed to how it originally operated. Secondly is going to be the sidebar navigation. I found this incredibly useful. You won't be able to see a lot of this because my face is blocking this, but you can see over here, you could scroll down through this and get to the sidebar notification. You can click on any individual area of this to jump to a specific section of the project, and I think that this is one of the things. I'm curious how useful people found this. I found it incredibly useful. I do think it would be interesting as people get more familiar with Gamefound and learn this is a thing, they might get used to scrolling around through the sidebar, even if they haven't really been doing that until now. I do think it would be interesting to be able to maybe hover over it and see what other things are in there, because a lot of times there were sections, like for instance, let's say testimonials is a good example. A lot of times there might have been sections where I wanted to go to the testimonials or a specific subsection that wasn't necessarily its own line item, but rather was buried amongst a general category of things. I think it would be interesting to see if there's some way of showing people everything without crowding the sidebar. It's a balance for sure, but something worth noting. The products and optional buys. In Gamefound, they actually have, obviously, the cards. I can't click on these to show you now because it's not an active campaign, but you can actually click through and treat each individual pledge level as a genuine product. You can treat each optional buy as a genuine product. And again, this is going to be because Gamefound, treated from the ground up, is built around that. In Kickstarter, and Kickstarter did just for the first time starts adding optional buys or whatnot, or add-ons people can select, but even now the way it's being done is kind of on the secondary pledge as opposed to feeling like you're shopping. At the end of the day, Kickstarter is not a store. Gamefound is not a store. You can put whatever language you want on it, but you and I know it's a store. They're offering a product and a service, and nowadays in most countries, you're starting to introduce more and more laws around protection of that concept. You're not just giving money and hoping you'll get some sort of reward. They are protecting the consumer, because at the end of the day, you are paying money for a promised product, and the world is adjusting to this concept and the way it works. And so that, to that end, as a store, I want to see the products that you are selling. I like the concept of actually seeing what is available, what is on offer, as opposed to having to read through walls of text to try to figure it out. Now, obviously, as someone who's very Kickstarter proficient, I've gotten better at that over time, and I assume many of you have gotten better at that over time. But for many, it is still a confusing, baffling place. Try to remember your first all-in Kickstarter with tons of stuff, and how you have to navigate and what you have to learn and how you have to read through the comments and ask people questions. It generally is an overwhelming concept, and I think treating it more like a storefront will, to some extent, add to the usability, to the general help of both new people to the space, as well as veterans like whoever. So yeah, that's going to be one that I really liked. Then lastly is going to be stretch goals as clickable items. They had stretch goals where, I'm going to see if I can find the stretch goals over here. So the stretch goals on Gamefound were going to be very much clickable items over here. So you can click on this and jump through and see the actual stretch goal and next stretch goal, previous stretch goal. Each one is its own clickable entity in the platform. And again, this goes back to it being built from the ground up around that concept. And by the way, here are going to be the Gamefound, the various items you can do to add to your cart. Right now you can't because it's not currently available, because I said the Kickstarter is the crowdfunding platform is currently closed at the moment, and it will open up eventually for the pledge manager. But yeah, each of these is its own clickable entity because these are actual technological blocks of whatever in terms of the way it's being managed and the way the data is being stored. This is no longer simply some giant page full of a PDF of a million different pieces of information without having some sort of technological something built around it. And so that's going to be the things I generally enjoyed more about Gamefound, and it's generally more of a solid infrastructural change to handle the pledges, to handle the stretch goals, and to handle the optional buys. And so overall, Gamefound, I would say, has been a better experience, but not significantly so compared to Kickstarter, and with some cons as well. That would be my overall experience of the two campaigns back and forth. At the end of the day, I think Gamefound succeeded in making Kickstarter backers feel at home without taking them drastically out of their comfort zone. It gave them a place. I mean, we can see the success of this campaign. Don't get me wrong, ISS Vanguard, the question is always going to be, would ISS Vanguard have raised more on Kickstarter? And I think the answer is almost certainly going to be yes. But there's a cost to launching new things. Gamefound sat there and said, we are trying to build a platform. We will take a hit on ISS Vanguard. Hopefully enough of our audience is coming from loving us that we won't lose a ton of people. So maybe they lost $1 million. I don't know what they lost, but I'm almost certain they lost something. Because even if they got 99.9% of the people they would have, that's still the 0.1 that they wouldn't have. Now, I would wager that the 0.1's higher than that. I would wager there's a decent amount of people who did not join the campaign because they weren't aware. They're on Kickstarter. They weren't following Awakened Realms, whatever it is. And so overall, I think they did a solid job. They had a great launch to the platform, and hopefully it'll continue to grow. Past that, just random stuff that I noticed that I would like to see, or things I thought of as I was going through it. And the difference between Gamefound and Kickstarter, and the reason I'm doing this video, is Gamefound is something that is a new software that is going to constantly be implementing and iterating and growing. If you look at Gamefound as a pledge manager, it grew and developed over time. There's an active team behind this technology, as opposed to Kickstarter, which it has changed over time, but often does not feel like it. And so I am optimistic that Gamefound is... Well, first of all, I'm optimistic that Gamefound is watching this video. So whoever is watching from Gamefound, hi there. And secondly, I believe that they have roadmaps. And so to whatever degree this feedback is useful, and as well, put in the comments down below yourself, by the way, whatever you felt about the platform, whatever your notes, your comparisons, your contrasts, your experience, put that all down in the comments down below so that anyone from Gamefound who is watching this can pay attention, can get that context, that customer feedback. It does not mean you'll get what you want, but it may well mean that you came up with an idea, a thought, a process, something that worked or didn't work for you that wasn't on their radar. Or even if it was on their radar, having more people say something is generally the way people change. And take my YouTube channel. If someone says, I want to see X, Y, and Z, I note it and I don't do anything about it. But if multiple people say it, I start to acknowledge it. I'm never going to change because of one person, but I will always change because of, well, almost always. I will almost always change because of the general user feedback as a whole. And so, with that said, so what else? What's going on here? What's going on with Gamefound? What did I see that I would like to see differently, or all that? First of all, color contrast here. The color contrast of the white on very light green. I mean, you can read it, but it's not the best color contrast. I've certainly seen better. Small, minor note. This is a little tricky because I don't know how much of a whole graphical meaning it can go black on green. The green is obviously tied to Gamefound, but the question there would be, do you go with dark text on green, light text on green, maybe something a little grayer? I don't know. There's options. I'm not a graphic designer. I'll just say that I found it to be not the easiest to read. The last update concept over here is very cool, but it doesn't look like it's something clickable, especially because of the way these titles are. It says last update, thank you, and the thumbs, and yes, you can click on this over here, but it's not nearly as obvious that there's a full section where you can go to the most recent update and see what's going on there. And so this one over here, like the idea, like the concept, not as immediately obvious, at least to myself. The comment section. So comments are a big one that are going to be very hard to judge. Comments have a lot of usability improvements over Kickstarter. At the same time, and by the way, you can put your comment over here and tag it with suggestion for Gamefound, which is interesting. So there's, you'll see over here, there's a lot of updates, people putting themselves, read the updates, email notifications, search and comments. There are lots of different things, and that actually is a good one. I forgot about that one. Email notifications of when their comments is replied to. Did not get any of that, would have loved to get it. But aside from that, so you can go ahead and put in your various suggestions for Gamefound and tag it so that Gamefound can see it. But the comment section as a whole, while it had many improvements that made it a better system, it's hard to accurately judge it because ISS Vanguard was so large that the sheer number of comments made it almost hard to manage just because of how popular the game is. So it's hard to compare this to something that is, a $300,000 campaign and then saying whether it's usable or not. There are a lot of features, including tags, most recent, most popular, all those. The lack of knowing when your comment was replied to, it definitely made it harder to track what happened. I occasionally commented on the campaign and would have to go back and check it manually. So yeah, lots of things over there, but the comment section as a whole is just harder to manage. The daily, I mentioned this already. I was going to say the 50% of the daily or whatnot is 50% of the progress towards the daily goal. Just feels like a weird phrasing. I am curious on late pledge notifications, meaning there's a lot of people, this because of the fact that we have an integrated crowdfunding platform and pledge manager, it seems to me that any number of people who checked this campaign, who said notify me on launch, in theory, they all could or should get notifications when the pledge manager opens up. It seems like an easy feature to implement, something that Kickstarter probably wouldn't have been able to do, but they can do it over here on Gamefound. Meaning all you have to do is click notify me on launch on Gamefound, and then in theory, that should actually transfer over to the pledge manager when that opens up as well. So there should be greater degree of synergy, of immediateness between the two platforms. The FAQ. The FAQ searches for title only. It does not search for content. Not always a big deal, but depending on what you're searching for, searching the content would not be the hardest thing to change, and it should in theory open up more potential matches for searches, although if the FAQ is long enough, then it will also potentially muddy the waters of what shows up in the search. So, but I imagine FAQs generally, a long FAQ is 50 questions. I imagine it wouldn't be the biggest deal there. Showing campaign status of other campaigns. So when you click on Awakened Realms, you'll see over here the various other campaigns. Something Awakened Realms talked about in my interview with them about Gamefound was the idea that they wanted to have more general awareness about how things were going in other campaigns. I think that showing, hey, look over here, we have Tainted Grail is delivered, or Wave 1 delivered, they can have that too. Etherfields, Wave 1 delivered, Flick of Faith, delivered, Great Wall board game, in progress. They could have all those statuses of how a campaign is doing when you click through to the creator. I think it would give people generally that general awareness of what's going on. Shipping calculator. I think that there should be a shipping calculator. I'm not sure how hard it is. By the way, as a side point, they still have click notify on launch. They've had this the whole entire campaign. I don't know what it does once the campaign is actually live, but that was still there. Shipping calculator. So they have this whole entire shipping chart, which is great. I think they should have it. You shouldn't make people go through a calculator, but in theory, there's no reason that they shouldn't have a shipping calculator always present to a certain extent. You can plug in the weight, you can say the projected weight of the package, you can say where a person's from. Having an actual weight where people can punch in what they are getting and then whatever, I don't think would be the hardest thing to implement, and can provide people a lot of just direct, hey, I'm getting the base pledge, I'm getting these two add-ons, and I'm from Poland. And then punch it in, and you'll get a rough shipping estimate. The downside of that, obviously, is when you have a shipping calculator, people will take it more as fact, as opposed to the generic estimate. But I think you can put up enough notifications, warnings, whatever it is, and it would just give people a lot more usability in terms of that shipping estimate. Obviously, those things are only as useful as how accurate they will actually be. If they are constantly wrong, then it just becomes a guessing game, and this chart may as well be what you get. From there, content creator profiles. I love the idea, and this one's selfish obviously, but I love the idea of having profiles around content creators, meaning being able to say, oh, you know what, hey, Board Game Co over here, let me click on him and let me see what else he has been involved in Gamefound and other Gamefound campaigns. And the reason for that is because, meaning as myself, Board Game Co, obviously I benefit from that because there are more opportunities to be tagged, to be seen, to be visible, to whatever. But more than that, you can get an idea of, let's be frank, people don't put videos in their campaigns unless the person was generally positive about it to some degree. So you can get an idea whether that person's tastes align with the campaign by clicking through and saying, hey, Board Game Co has been on this campaign, this campaign, this campaign, ooh, he was on that campaign and I really didn't like that game. You can get an idea of someone's, taste and whether they align with your own with a quick click through of whether their Kickstarter previews, reviews, gameplay, whether those things match up. Now, obviously, previews and gameplay are potentially a little different. If they're not an opinion, it can be different, doesn't really tell you that much. But I think the idea of having a content creator profile and matching it up, and then people can also follow content creators. You can put it in a different way as well. And this is something that Marcin mentioned in my interview with him about Gamefound. The idea of following a content creator and using that as your reference point, like, oh, Board Game Co showed up on a campaign, let me go check that out. So I think that would be an interesting idea to have that kind of linkness between content creator profiles and whatnot. It'd be easy. Content creators would obviously be happy to work with Awakened Realms in this sense. I say easy. Never say easy with anything technological, but it would be relatively easy, as I assume people would be happy to work with Gamefound in terms of setting up a, the information or the contact or whatever it is, and then having it tagged from there on in. Past that, Instagram tie-ins. I think that would be cool. If you ever go to certain websites, you'll scroll down to the bottom, and there'll be a section where you'll see, and it doesn't have to be at the bottom, it could be wherever, there'll be a section where you just see posts or pictures, and it'll be like anyone who tagged this company will show up there. You can set up an Instagram feed where people who tag hashtag ISS Vanguard or whatnot, they all show up in some sort of section on Gamefound. I think that'd be an interesting idea to get what people are saying or whatnot. There could be risks, obviously. When you set up some sort of open source tagging like that, you're just going to get whatever shows up, good or bad. But at the same time, I think it'd be an interesting way to involve people with the campaign, knowing that as they get tagged, they may well show up on the campaign page in that Instagram section or whatnot. I think it'd be an interesting idea. Cross-linking to Facebook communities. Now, so this one was inspired by the fact that when I clicked over here, I wondered what it would do on that little Facebook tag, and it doesn't really do much. It lets you share the campaign or whatever, share something. I mean, there was a way, let me see if I can click on it. It was a way, popping up over there. It wants me to log in because I'm incognito when doing these videos. But I think it would be cool to be able to associate a campaign to the community around that campaign. Very often, project creators are creating communities on Facebook, or maybe not Facebook. Maybe it's on Board Game Geek. Maybe it's wherever it is. But the idea of having a community of people that are interested in that project. ISS Vanguard is a great example. ISS Vanguard has a very heavily active Facebook campaign, Facebook group that is very active and talks about the campaign, talks about whatever. And I think the idea of linking the crowdfunding campaign to that community gives people another opportunity to talk, to be involved, to be whatever. I think it would be an interesting idea to have that cross-link back and forth between the two. Linking stretch goals to updates. So they have these stretch goals over here, but they didn't have the stretch goals. Let me see if I can scroll down again. They have all these stretch goals over here, but the stretch goals aren't actually linked to any update. You click on it, and it doesn't take you to the update that talks about it. I think that whenever there's an update, and this obviously could be case by case, maybe the creator doesn't choose to do it, but I think that linking stretch goals to updates that talk about the stretch goals are generally useful or whatnot. Like it says over here, more details in day 17 update. That could have been a URL. That could have been a click. That could have taken you to that thing. I don't know why it just says more details there. It just seems like it's another opportunity to, again, introduce that barrier to entry. I think that the stretch goals, as well as optional buys for that matter, should generally be linked to the update that talks about them for that greater degree of information without having people have to hunt it down. Past that as well, the general box of stretch goals, I found this a little bit confusing, that not drastically so, but I think the whole box should be clickable. The fact that you have to click on the text or the picture, but the rest of the box doesn't do much for you is a little bit of, again, a user experience design thing that is not necessarily as whatever. Lastly, I'm not going to talk about those are all the things I thought of offhand while going through, or I thought of doing the campaign. I'm sure there's more if I really try to do a deep dive, but that's what I was able to think of currently. Lastly, I'll say that this Gamefound crowdsourcing platform thing introduces a new conversation about the difference, the blurred line between Kickstarter and a pledge manager. And this blurred line has been going on for a long time, and I've talked about it before, but the general idea is it used to be you had a Kickstarter and people came in and then you raised money and and you moved on and done. Now we have getting people involved and aware for months, potentially in the case of ISS Vanguard for years beforehand, getting people hyped, excited, getting them all into it. I mean, on the bare minimum, you should be building up your community before you touch your Kickstarter. You should be having hundreds, if not thousands of people who have clicked notify me on launch. The Kickstarter goes up, or in the case of Gamefound, the crowdfunding platform goes up. And over here we have Kingdom Rush Elemental Uprising with 2,800 people currently following it. And hopefully by the time it launches February 9th, that number may well be 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, who knows what it'll be. But you build up your base of people, you launch, you get a primarily amount of day 1, day 2 backers out the door, funding your campaign, you get all that, and then you close 2-3 weeks later, and then you still have an open pledge for anywhere from a month to a year later, sometimes in some cases. This line of what Kickstarter has been very blurred in the sense that it used to be whatever it was, and now it's really all the before, all the after, and a drop, a slice in the middle where the action primarily takes place. And Gamefound, by being both a pledge manager and Kickstarter and a crowdfunding platform, are effectively blurring those lines even further, because there's all these questions of, okay, great. I mean, there's clearly going to be an option to get this game on Gamefound. So why is it locked? What do you even have to back it on Gamefound at all? What about those increase in pledge in prices in the pledge manager, which is, I did a full video. I'll link to that down below as well. I did a full video about the differences between doing the crowdfunding campaign, as well as backing in the pledge manager, and the whole motivations behind keeping those prices the same or different. But we're just blurring those lines further than we ever have in the past, and it is going to lead to its own potential problems, questions, complaints, but also a lot of benefits. For instance, as a project creator, you no longer have to set yourself up on Kickstarter and on Gamefound. You do it once, and then you're in both places at once, assuming you use the same pledge manager, which I assume you would. It just seems like it would be easier, but I don't know the rules or whatnot. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting conversation. It's going to be one that develops. I just thought it'd be interesting to put together my first thoughts after having experienced my first official Gamefound campaign, how it compares to Kickstarter, what I'd love to see next, and that's basically it. Past that, I wish Awakened Realms I wish Gamefound all the best in terms of launching this platform and seeing where it takes us next. I'm excited that we already have our next game. I thought that it would sit there for who knows how long before we got to that next step. I'm excited that we already have the next game on Gamefound, and I'm excited to see where that goes next, as well as what the one after that becomes. It's very interesting to see. It's very interesting to be in this space in general and to see where it takes us. Until next time, I hope you found this useful. I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Head on over to either the comments down below or to ISS Vanguard to post whatever updates or features you want to see from your next Gamefound campaign. And as always, have a good one.